Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something, because we all going through a similar kind of something, all of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you're about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser. Here to get down to the heart of the matter, so be prepared to peel back the layers. Pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Dani.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Rantings of Dani. And if you've been following this journey since the podcast launched, you know that the goal and mission is to change the world one conversation at a time. And in order to do that, you have to talk about the things that are tough. You have to talk about the things that matter. And, you know, that for me means taking on what I consider to be some of the most divisive issues that we have in this country and even around the world in some respects. So we've just finished up a 7-part series on racism. And next on that list, you know, because I'm all about taking the easy road, is religion. So religion is next up, and this is the first of several episodes on this subject. And, you know, I've had people ask me, why take on religion? Why do a podcast that talks about something that is so sensitive? And the reason is real simple for me, because I believe that we can do good in having this conversation. I believe that there can be new understanding, new ground covered, new considerations given to each other. And that's important to me. It's important to me to take on the things that sometimes people use as justification for the other things that they do. So like in covering racism and taking a look at that conversation, a lot of what I saw is people who would be vehemently, you know, spewing racist things out of their mouth would turn right around and post things about being a Christian and about Jesus and about things like that. Now, of course, not every Christian feels that way. I know that. And at the same time, that's a lot of what I saw. And it's a lot of what I saw growing up. And so it has to be part of the conversation. I wouldn't be doing the podcast justice. I wouldn't be doing myself justice. I wouldn't be being authentic if we didn't have this conversation. So that's why we're going to talk about religion. And we're going to talk about religion from the position of how is it being used? Is it being used to help people heal and to grow and to find peace and experience love and be kind and forgiving? Or is religion being used to separate, to divide and conquer? Is it being used to manipulate, to instill fear? Is it being used for financial gain? Is it being used to skew politics and the government? How is religion being used specifically in America? And how is it impacting relations around the world? How does religion play a part in our wars? All of those things. And I think that it's a viable conversation. It's something that, you know, we ought to be talking about. And we ought to be talking about it from a position of saying, okay, what's the truth here? Not what do I want to believe, not what feels comfortable for me, but what is the truth when it comes to religion, and specifically religion in America? You know, so one of the things that I know is that when it comes to conflict, when we think about conflict in communication, right, 85% of it is just straight out simple miscommunication. It can be resolved with a minimal of effort, just having a conversation, being open to seeing what the other person meant to say or what their intention was, and it can be resolved. Awesome. An additional 10% of conflict can be resolved with some good effort. I mean, like, you got to dig in and be willing to be open to consider where the other person is coming from and step outside yourself a little bit, but it still can be resolved. That 10% can, right? The remaining 5% of conflict is rooted in our core beliefs, our value systems, the things that we hold near and dear, which a lot of the time includes our faith or our religion and our spirituality and our practices surrounding that, you know? So it's important to have this conversation because here's what I think about. Imagine a world where even our religious faith, even our practices and our belief systems didn't divide us. What if we could actually come to resolution and have, you know, viable communication and conversation that didn't judge someone else simply because they believed differently than you, or they gave God a different name, or weren't even sure that they believed in God at all? What if we were able to actually get past that about someone and not make it mean something about them? Does that mean that 100% of all conflict could find resolution? Because what kind of world would that be? Kind of crazy, right? So for me, that makes it worth it. That makes it worth maybe people judging me. That makes it worth people making assumptions or thinking things about me. Like already today, I had a friend of mine who I've been working with and talking to and sharing things with. She told me that she's had a run-in with a couple of her family members, 2 or 3 of them already, who are pretty sure that I'm the devil. Simply because as she and I talk about things and the things that we were taught as children growing up, you know, in the Christian faith and in a small southern town, as we talk about those things as adults and the things that we don't necessarily agree with, or the things that we question, or the things that, you know, we just don't know that we buy it, right? In having those adult, mature, responsible conversations, the people around her who want her to continue to believe the way she always have literally said that about me, and that's okay. That is okay, and it's okay because I've gotten to a place where I don't care what anybody else thinks about my relationship with my God and my faith, and I don't feel the need to judge yours. So again, that's why this conversation, that's why this topic. I have never personally understood, I won't say never because there was a time when I did, when I was an active, practicing Sunday through Saturday church-going Christian, I absolutely judged other people's beliefs, and I absolutely judged their salvation and their all kinds of that stuff. And as I started going through this journey, which I think your spiritual journey is probably the most important one you're ever going to have in this life, when you get to a place where you figure out what you believe for you and your personal relationship with your God, you become unshakable. You become unmovable. And it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's the pastor who baptized you when you were a child. It doesn't matter if it was the priest. It doesn't matter if it's your parents. It doesn't matter. When you become solid in what you believe, nothing else matters, you know? Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when people say things about you. It doesn't take away your humanity, you know? We're still people, so we're still going to feel the way we feel when people say the things that they might say. But that's why this conversation is important to me. It's important to me, too, because there's a powerful impact that faith and religion has on people. For many people, it defines who they are, and at the end of the day, it's their justification for how they live, right? So in knowing that, I look at how we approach this conversation and what people who lead these religions take on? What's your responsibility when you choose to become a pastor, a preacher, an evangelist, a teacher, a guru, when you choose to take on those roles of leadership when it comes to faith and religion, I believe that you have accountability. I don't believe that it raises you above accountability. I don't believe that it raises you above question. In fact, the exact opposite. I think that it takes you to a higher level that says absolutely you are accountable for what you do, for what you say, for how you live, for what you teach, for what you preach, for what you tell people who believe that what you say is God inspired. You become accountable for that. So in preparing for this, I've taken a look at a lot of different ways that I want to address religion. I want to address religion as it relates to racism in America. I want to address religion as it relates to politics and government. I want to address religion, as to, prosperity teachings and prosperity churches and mega churches and, division and control and fear even. And so that's what you can expect from this conversation. And there is absolutely nothing and no one-off limits. So just letting you know that right now. If you are a pastor or a preacher that wants to be part of this conversation, hit me up. Dani at therantingsofdani.com. We can have that conversation. Message me on Facebook. I would love to dig in and get to the meat of things. In looking at this, one of the things that I wanted to do was take a look at the major religions, right? And there were lots that I wasn't familiar with, but I'll give you the breakdown of just a few. So if we know that there are 8 billion people in the world, right? 2.1 billion of those people are practicing Christians, right? So a little over a fourth, automatically it's Christian. 1.3 billion are Islam, right? And then the third largest group at 1.1 billion, and this classification is kind of like odd to me because they grouped it all together, but it's considered secular / agnostic / atheist, which by definition, they're not the same thing, but somehow for this classification, they've been looped together. So what you have right off the bat is 4.5 billion people fall into those top 3 categories. Now, in addition to that, you'll find religions like Buddhism and Taoism, which is the practice of the Tao. People call it the Tao, but it's the Tao, right? Probably one of the most well-known practitioners of the Tao was Dr. Wayne Dyer, who I absolutely adore. You've got Judaism, Hinduism, Wiccan, right? The Sikh faith, Sikhism. So these are the most widely practiced, most well-known religions out there. And of course, there's some of you may be saying, did she say Wiccan? I did, and it is a religion. And so we're going to talk about that as well, right? And what's the connotation that comes with that? And and why is there a connotation around witchcraft or Wiccan, the Wiccan faith, and where did that come from, and why did it come from, and those types of things. So buckle up, folks, buckle up. Here we go. The very first religion that I want to take on is Christianity. And there's going to be many, many facets of this conversation. And I want to talk about Christianity because it's the faith that I grew up in. And even though I've adopted additional beliefs that go along with it, there's still a lot of the Christian faith that rings very true for me. And the things that don't, and the way that I see it being manipulated in churches and in the media and in politics makes my stomach turn. It really like rubs me the wrong way because I don't believe that a lot of the way that it's represented actually even aligns with the teachings that are found in the Bible. Like I just don't. I don't see it. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the responsibilities of your pastors and preachers. What are you teaching? And then what are you living? What I find really interesting about the Christian faith is it's not enough for there to just be Christian. Well, what kind of Christian are you? Right? Are you Catholic? Are you Presbyterian? Are you Baptist? Are you Southern Baptist? Are you Episcopalian? Do you belong to the Church of God in Christ? Are you Mormon? Are you Latter-day Saint Mormon or just the other Mormon? Are you Seventh-day Adventist? Are you Jehovah's Witness? Like, how do you believe in Jesus exactly? Let me know. And, do you believe in God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost, as in like the Godhead, the Trinity, or does it, is that a little bit too much for you? Are you with the whole gifts and speaking in tongues thing, or is that like outside of the realm of reality? Like there's so much division even within religions, and it reminds me to some degree of the division that you have within races, right? So, like in the very first episode of the racism podcast, I said, how much melanin is okay, and I talk about within the Black race, within African Americans, you have additional prejudice and additional discrimination based on the amount of melanin in your skin, and where does that come from, and how far does that go? And I see the same thing repeated within Christianity. So it's like the dissection and the division alone, just setting Christians apart from everyone else, wasn't enough. How else can we divide? How else can we keep people from connecting and being okay with each other and their faith? How can I give you another tool by which to judge you? Can I do that? It's just like the most amazing thing in the world to me. And so when I look back at Christianity, so you will have people that actually do the scholarly route, and they'll talk about, that every Christian holiday was created on top of an existing pagan holiday. And that was because they wanted to create a religion in which they could get people to easily convert to. So if you're already celebrating that day, then it's okay to give it another name and just, kind of woo you over. Some might say it's like the crab in the bucket syndrome, right? You put a crab in a pot of water and slowly turn the heat up. Now, I'm not saying that getting someone to believe in Christianity is like boiling a crab. I'm definitely not saying that. What I'm saying is that, there are facts behind how the religion was created and how the Bible was written. I mean, I don't even know if everybody realizes this. But the Bible, we always talk, and we think about the translations of the Bible, and we think about the King James Version, the New King James, the NIV, the Amplified Bible, right? There's all these different variations. Do you all know that the Bible is the most translated book in history, in the world? It's the most translated book in the world. And so you wonder, when people say, oh no, this is what the Bible says, what did or didn't get lost in translation? And who says your translation is the right one? And at what point do you just say it's up to each individual person to know what the truth is for them? I don't know. The second most translated book in the history of the world is the Tao. And the Tao is, it's the 81 verses that were written by Lao Tzu. And, it's an entirely different look on life than the Bible. And, so when I look at how much man has had a hand in what religion teaches you, I wonder how much you can trust what's written in a book. And I know some of you all are like, Dani, you can go to hell. That's blasphemous. Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's blasphemous because, for my Christians out there, the Bible says, study to show thyself approved. It doesn't say only study the Bible. That's not what it says. right? And am I not supposed to study and see what sits well with me? Am I not supposed to question? I think I am, because when I think from a Christian perspective, I think about, 12-year-old Jesus in the churches and in the synagogues back then, and he was certainly questioning, wasn't he? Like he was angry enough to turn over tables at the way people were teaching religion back then. And I almost kind of see a parallel to the way people feel about the way Christianity is being taught these days, and the way that it's being manipulated and used to spread hatred and division and judgment and fear and condemnation. And that's what it reminds me of. And I know that there are a lot of people who won't agree with me. It just is, it's what I see. I think if Jesus were walking around right now, what would he think about Christianity? If Jesus walked into some of these mega churches, I wonder how many tables would be overturned. How many people would be kicked out? I have a lot of ideas about that and my own feelings, obviously. And I'm interested in hearing yours, This is something that I think is worth talking about. When I take a look at the things that I've seen lately from Jesse Duplantis and Kenneth Copeland having a conversation about Jesse hearing from God on the jet he's already got and why he needs another one that costs $54 million. Why Creflo needs one. Why Paula White is Donald Trump's spiritual advisor and is adamant that he's not racist. Going all the way back to her conversations about, God having raised him up, and anybody that was against him was going against the hand of God. We're going to talk about that. I literally have pulled the quotes from things that she said. When we talk about the separation of church and state in this country, does that really exist? Because I don't believe that it does. When I pull a list of Donald Trump's spiritual, quote unquote, faith advisory council, and it's packed full of nothing but Christians, that's important to me. That's important to me because if you're the president of this country, I'm not saying that you don't have the right to your own religious practice. You absolutely do. However, if you choose to put together a spiritual advisory council, and the only people who are on that advisory council are people of one particular religion, when there are millions upon millions of other people in your country that belong to other religions, how can you be speaking on their behalf? How can you be making choices and decisions and guiding this country in such a way that it serves the needs and beliefs of all of those people if you don't have anyone on your advisory council that speaks for them? Who's on your faith advisory council, who's a Muslim, who practices Islam? Who's doing that? Who's in the position to speak for folks who are, spiritually minded, and they're not necessarily practicing a particular religion? Who's there to counsel you from a Daoistic perspective, or a Buddhist perspective? Who's representing the millions of Americans and the millions of citizens who don't practice Christianity as their faith? That's a question for me. How significant a role should your faith advisory council be having in the decisions of the world? You got to wonder if your entire faith council is Christian, where do they come down on Middle Eastern issues? How does that factor in? Because the Bible's pretty one-sided when it comes to things like that. Yeah. So I know that there are going to be times in this conversation where you are uncomfortable. And that kind of sort of makes me happy, because that's where growth occurs, outside of our comfort zone. That's where we get expanded, you know? That's where we evolve. That's where we kind of get to take things to another level, you know? And that's what I want this conversation to be about when it comes to religion. Not about who's right or wrong, not about whose faith is the best, not about who's going to heaven or hell, not about whether there is a heaven or hell, but rather about how we see each other and the choices that we make based on that, you know? I want to talk about pastors who the majority of their members are middle to lower income, and they're driving Bentleys, or their homes are, a few $1 million. Let's have that conversation. I need to know where Jesus comes down on that, And yes, I know that the Bible says, that he wants you to live life, and have it more abundantly. I know that. I know wealth isn't just monetary, though. I want to talk about pastors who pass judgment on our LGBTQ community, and yet don't know how to push away from the dining room table. Where does gluttony fall in that, sir? Where does gluttony fall in that, ma'am? Pastor, I need an answer. What makes that sin okay and another one not? I mean, gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins, yeah? So talk to me about that. And have a real conversation about it. How many pastors are having Sunday morning sermons addressing, the obesity epidemic in this country, right? Which is literally the degradation of your temple, right? If we're talking about the Christian faith, you believe your body is your temple, and you trashing it, like you treating your body like it's the slums, right? And yet, and compared to the number who are preaching about, how sexual promiscuity is wrong, or how, greed is wrong, or how, you're not supposed to be anything else, anything very, very focused on specs and not really looking for planks, if you know what I mean, right? That's a problem for me. And I think one of the reasons why this resonates with me so much when it comes to Christianity is because I was raised in it for such a long time, And in the last few weeks, I've seen and heard pastors and preachers and people in positions of authority making fun of church hurt, which is a real thing. It's actually not church hurt, it's spiritual hurt, which to me is nothing to joke about, I personally believe, let me give you some ground truth for me so that you know where I'm coming from in these episodes. I believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So that means I have a higher self, I have a spiritual self. I believe that I was created by God, which I say God, you can call it source, universe, higher power. I don't care what name you give it. God is just what I feel comfortable saying. And I believe that I was created whole, perfect, and complete in the image of God. That's what I believe. So that means I was created with nothing missing, nothing broken. I also believe that, as when we're born and we're babies, we have no idea who we are. We don't know we're whole. We don't know we're perfect. We don't know we're complete. And we look to our external world to tell us who we are. And during that process, whenever we are hurt, whenever we're disappointed, whenever we experience pain and we're let down or we're abandoned, we put up like walls to protect us. We develop ways of being. And every time we put up that wall and we develop a new way of being, we get one step further away from that perfect wholeness that we were created with to start with. And it's not that it ever leaves us. It's just that we become less connected to it over time. That's what I believe. And so the goal for me in this journey, in this lifetime, is to start to remove those barriers, to get back to openness and vulnerability, to get back to acceptance and love and forgiveness and kindness. And the closer that I can get to that, being who I was created to be before anybody ever disappointed me, before anybody ever hurt me, before anybody ever left me, before anybody ever didn't love me the right way, didn't love me properly, before anybody ever let me down, before any of those things ever happened that taught me or that said to me, life isn't fair and life is painful. Before I ever learned that, the goal for me in this life is to try to get back to who that was. Who was I intended to be at the beginning of it all? And I think what's happened is religion, a lot of religions aren't working to get us back to that place of wholeness and goodness. A lot of it is about telling you how worthy you aren't to get back there. A lot of religion is about making you feel bad about who you are and where you are, and using that to their advantage, whatever that advantage may be, whether that's politics, whether that's financial gain, whether that's divide and conquer, whether that's confusion. We're going to talk about that. I want to talk about confusion and stuff. As soon as I said confusion, that thing went off in the back of my head. And when you grow up in a Christian church, well, confusion's of the devil, right? And I want to talk about that. Why are we still blaming stuff on the devil? If Jesus already kicked his butt and threw him in hell, what are we talking about right now? Is it really the devil or is it just us? Is it just our free will and our choice to do these things? I think sometimes the devil's a scapegoat to call me crazy, but I really do. So if you're a pastor and you're in my circle, if you're a preacher and you're in my circle and you're in my circle of influence and I see you and I'm listening, don't be surprised if I call a thing and it's not personal. I just believe that you have a responsibility to the people who listen to you to represent God appropriately, to represent love. And to me, that's the other piece of my core belief. I believe that God is love and love is God. I believe if you want me to define God for you, then it's love. And if you want me to define love for you, then it's God. They are interchangeable. One of my best friends ever on this earth was an amazing gentleman by the name of Tavis Brunson. And Tavis was an admitted, self-proclaimed Jesus freak, # Team Jesus, all the way. That's who he was. And he was also a minister. And he also cursed, and he also was a poet, and he was just an incredible person with no judgment. And he used to say, I God you, instead of saying, I love you. And I say used to say because he passed away December 2016. And I think about him a lot in this journey that I'm on, and especially in this conversation. But I God you instead of I love you, because they're interchangeable. And I just don't know that a lot of pastors and preachers and leaders of different religions are godding people, and that their God feels like love. I think a lot of times God is being used for judgment and manipulation and division, and that's not okay. So let's dig in. Let's have this conversation, and let's call a thing. See what we can agree on. See what we can understand about each other, and maybe maybe change the world a little bit, promote some healing and some growth in the process. That's my hope. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, please hit me up. I've already told you, Dani at the Rantings of Dani. If you haven't listened to the racism episodes, please do that, and spread and share the world, share the wealth, share what's happening here. The feedback that I'm getting is phenomenal. So I want to keep this party going, right? I want to keep the train going. So let's do that. If you are listening, you can listen on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify. Hopefully, we're in backlog for Spotify, so I'm waiting for that to happen, and then hopefully soon iHeartRadio as well. If you find this valid, please share it and subscribe. For goodness sake, please subscribe. I appreciate you all for listening. You know the way I end this thing every single time. Be amazing, be light, be love, and your girl is about to be out of here as soon as I get my life together, right? I'll see you guys soon.